You know what I've noticed after all these years of studying success and watching people try to make something of themselves? Most folks are so distracted, so pulled in 17 different directions that if you asked them right now what their main goal was 3 months ago, they'd have to stop and think about it. And that's not because they have a bad memory. It's because they never really committed to it in the first place. They were too busy being available to everyone else, too busy keeping up with what everyone else was doing, too busy responding to every little thing that came their way. Let me tell you something that might sting a little bit, but it's the truth. If you want to build something meaningful with your life, there's going to come a time when the people closest to you won't recognize you anymore. Not because you've changed who you are at your core, but because you've changed what you're willing to tolerate, what you're willing to give your time to, and what you're willing to sacrifice for the future you're trying to build. I remember working with a young man years ago, sharp as a tack, full of potential, but scattered all over the place. Every time I'd see him, he'd be chasing a different opportunity, excited about a different idea, convinced that this was finally the thing that would change everything for him. One day I sat him down and I said, "Son, you've got more directions than a compass factory, and you're not going north on any of them." He didn't like hearing that much. But something must have clicked because about 6 months later, I didn't hear from him anymore. No calls, no visits, nothing. Some of the other folks we both knew started asking me about him. "Have you seen him? Is he all right? Did something happen?" And I just smiled because I knew exactly what was happening. That young man had finally made a decision. He'd picked one mountain to climb and he was climbing it. When I finally did see him again, about 18 months after he'd gone quiet, he walked into my office and I almost didn't recognize him. Not physically, though he did look different, stronger somehow, more certain in his movements. But what really struck me was the way he carried himself. There was a calmness there that wasn't there before, a sense of purpose. He'd built his business from nothing to something substantial, not because he'd found some magic formula or gotten lucky, but because he'd done something most people aren't willing to do. He'd disappeared from the social scene. He'd stopped going to every party, every gathering, every networking event where nothing real ever gets networked. He'd stopped being available every time his phone rang, and in that silence, in that focused solitude, he'd built something real. Here's what most people don't want to hear. Success requires temporary isolation. Notice I said temporary, because it's not forever, but it's also not optional. There's a season for planting and a season for harvest, and you can't have people trampling through your field during planting season and expect to have anything to harvest later. But we live in a world now that's designed to keep you distracted, to keep you scattered, to keep you mediocre. Think about it. Your phone buzzes, and you're supposed to check it immediately. Someone posts something, and you're supposed to comment on it right away. Someone wants to grab coffee and pick your brain, and you're supposed to say yes because, well, you don't want to seem rude or unavailable or like you think you're better than everyone else. So you say yes. You stay available. You stay accessible. And you know what else you stay? You stay broke. You stay frustrated. You stay wondering why everyone else seems to be moving forward while you're stuck in the same place. The truth is, society has conditioned us to value being liked over being successful, to value being included over being effective, to value being busy over being productive. And there's a massive difference between those things. Busy means your calendar is full. Productive means your bank account is full and your goals are being met. Busy means everyone knows what you're doing. Productive means you're doing what matters, whether anyone knows about it or not. I've watched this pattern repeat itself over and over again throughout my career. The people who make it, who really build something substantial, they all go through this phase where they disappear. And the people who stay stuck, who keep spinning their wheels year after year, they're the ones who never learn to say no, who never learn to protect their time, who never understood that you can't be everywhere and build something significant at the same time. Let me share something with you about the nature of focus that I learned the hard way. When you really commit to something, when you really decide that this goal, this dream, this objective is going to get your absolute best effort and attention, you're going to disappoint some people. Your friends are going to stop inviting you to things because you've said no so many times. Your family might think you've become distant or cold or too focused on yourself. People who are used to having access to you whenever they want it are going to feel neglected. And here's the part that nobody talks about. They're going to make you feel guilty about it. They're going to tell you that you've changed, that you're not the same person anymore, that success is making you forget where you came from. But you know what? They're half right. You have changed. You're not the same person anymore. But that's exactly the point. You can't get different results doing the same things, being the same person, making the same choices you've always made. There's a question I want you to ask yourself, and I want you to be brutally honest with the answer because your future depends on it. Are you willing to disappoint some people temporarily to avoid disappointing yourself permanently? Because that's really what we're talking about here. Every time you break your focus to accommodate someone else's agenda, every time you abandon your plan because someone else wants your attention, every time you let the urgent things crowd out the important things, you're making a choice. You're choosing temporary comfort over lasting achievement. You're choosing to be liked today over being successful tomorrow. And the brutal reality is that you can't have both, at least not at the same time, not while you're building. I've lived long enough to see this pattern play out in countless lives, including my own. The seasons of my greatest growth, the times when I made the most progress, the periods when I developed the skills and knowledge that would serve me for decades, those were always the times when I was least social, least available, least concerned with what everyone else thought about what I was doing. I wasn't being antisocial or arrogant. I was being focused. I was protecting my most valuable resource, which isn't money, it's not connections, it's not even opportunity. It's attention. Where your attention goes, your life follows. And if your attention is scattered across 100 different things, pulled in every direction by every person who wants a piece of it, then your life is going to be scattered too. Your results are going to be scattered. Your progress is going to be scattered. Everything is going to be diluted and weak because you never concentrated your energy on anything long enough to make it powerful. Think about sunlight for a moment. Sunlight is warm, it's pleasant, it's nice to have on a sunny day. But that same sunlight, when you focus it through a magnifying glass, when you concentrate it on a single point, you can start a fire. The energy was always there. The potential was always there. But it was diffused, spread out, touching everything lightly, but changing nothing significantly. It's only when you focus it, when you concentrate it, when you direct all of that energy to one specific point, that it becomes powerful enough to transform matter, to create heat, to ignite something. You are that sunlight. Your effort, your time, your attention, your energy, it's all there. But as long as it's spread thin across everything and everyone, it's never going to be powerful enough to ignite the kind of success you're capable of achieving. You've got to focus it. You've got to concentrate it. And yes, that means some areas of your life are going to get less light for a while. Some people are going to get less of your warmth. Some relationships are going to feel the absence of your energy. And that's the price, that's the cost, that's what it takes. Now let me tell you about how this actually works in practice, because understanding the concept is one thing, but implementing it in your daily life is where most people fall apart. I've spent years watching successful people, studying their habits, asking them questions. And you know what I've found? The ones who accomplish extraordinary things don't have extraordinary talent most of the time. What they have is an extraordinary ability to eliminate. See, most people think success is about addition. They think it's about adding more skills, more knowledge, more connections, more activities to their life. But the real secret, the thing that separates the achievers from the dreamers, is subtraction. It's about removing more than you add. It's about cutting away everything that doesn't serve your primary objective until what's left is so focused, so concentrated that it can't help but produce results. I learned this lesson watching a man build his business from scratch. He wasn't the smartest guy in the room, wasn't the most educated, didn't have the best connections or the most capital, but he had something more valuable than all of that. He had the ability to say no. And he said it a lot. No to lunch meetings that were really just gossip, sessions. No to conferences that were more about being seen than learning something valuable. No to investment opportunities outside his area of focus. No to partnerships that would dilute his vision. No to friendships that drained his energy without giving anything back. And people thought he was crazy. They thought he was missing out. They thought he was being short-sighted. But 5 years later, when his business was thriving and he'd built something substantial, all those same people wanted to know his secret. And his secret was simple. He protected his attention like it was gold, because he understood that it was more valuable than gold. Here's a distinction I want you to understand deeply. There's a difference between what's important and what's urgent. Urgent things demand immediate attention. The phone ringing, that's urgent. Someone needing you to put out a fire at work, that's urgent. A friend having a crisis at 10 o'clock at night, that's urgent. But important things, they don't scream at you. They don't demand immediate attention. They sit quietly in the background, waiting for you to give them the time and focus they deserve. Building your skills, that's important but rarely urgent. Working on your business plan, that's important but rarely urgent. Investing in your education, exercising, building meaningful relationships with people who elevate you, planning your financial future, all of these things are critically important, but they never feel urgent till it's too late. Till you wake up one day and realize you've spent years responding to urgent things while the important things withered and died from neglect. The way I learned to handle this was to treat my focused work time like a doctor's appointment. You wouldn't skip a doctor's appointment because someone wanted to chat, would you? You wouldn't miss surgery because there was a party to go to. But somehow we think it's okay to skip our focused work time, our development time, our building time for any little thing that comes up. I started blocking out my mornings, my best hours when my mind was sharpest, and treating them as sacred. During those hours, I wasn't available. The phone could ring off the hook, people could knock on the door. It didn't matter. Those hours belonged to the important work, the work that was building my future, and I protected them fiercely. And you know what happened? The urgent things somehow got handled anyway. The world didn't fall apart because I wasn't immediately available. The people who really needed me learned when they could reach me. And the people who just wanted to waste my time, well, they found someone else to bother. Let me tell you about the power of environment, because this matters more than most people realize. You can't do focused work in a chaotic environment any more than you can sleep in the middle of a rock concert. Your physical space shapes your mental space. I knew a writer who was struggling to finish his book. He'd been working on it for 3 years, making no real progress, getting more and more frustrated. One day he told me about his writing process, and I immediately saw the problem. He was trying to write at his kitchen table, with the television on in the background, his phone next to him, family members walking through, the whole 9 yards. I said, "You're not going to finish that book until you create a space that's designed for one purpose, writing." He thought I was being dramatic, but he tried it anyway. He converted a spare bedroom into an office. Nothing in there but a desk, a chair, and his computer. No phone, no internet connection, no distractions. Just him and the work. He finished that book in 4 months. Not because he suddenly got more talented or more motivated, but because he removed every excuse, every distraction, every easy way out. He created an environment that made focus the path of least resistance. This is what I mean by building your fortress. You need to engineer your life, deliberately and intentionally, to support the level of focus required for what you're trying to accomplish. And this isn't just about physical space, though that's part of it. It's about creating boundaries with people. It's about being willing to tell folks, I'm working on something important right now and I need to focus on it completely for the next few months. I'm not going to be around much. It's not personal. It's necessary. Real friends, people who genuinely care about your success, they'll understand that. They'll respect it. They might even be inspired by it. The people who get offended, who make you feel guilty, who try to pull you back into the same old patterns, those aren't your friends. They're anchors. And you can't sail to new horizons with anchors holding you down. You know what else you need to understand about focus? It's cumulative. It compounds. Most people think about time in a linear way. They think 1 focused hour today plus 1 focused hour tomorrow equals 2 focused hours of progress. But that's not how it works. Focus compounds like interest in a bank account. The more consecutive focused hours you string together, the more momentum you build, the deeper you can go into the work, the more significant your progress becomes. It's like pushing a heavy boulder. The first push barely moves it. The second push moves it a little more. But by the 10th push, the 20th push, that boulder is rolling on its own momentum, and your pushes are making it go faster and faster. But here's the catch. If you stop pushing, if you break that momentum to check your phone or have a meaningless conversation or attend some event that doesn't matter, that boulder rolls back to where it started. You lose all that momentum. You have to start over. And this is why scattered effort produces scattered results. You're constantly starting over. I learned to think about my work in seasons, just like farming. There's a time to plant. And during that time, you're in the dirt doing work that nobody sees, that doesn't look impressive, that produces no immediate results. You're just putting seeds in the ground day after day, trusting that if you do the work right, if you stay focused and consistent, something will grow. Then there's a time for tending, where you're watering, weeding, protecting what you've planted from the elements and from pests. This work isn't glamorous either. It's repetitive and necessary, and most people quit during this phase because they don't see results fast enough. But if you stick with it, if you stay focused on tending what you've planted, eventually you get to harvest season. That's when people see what you've been building. That's when the results show up. That's when everyone wants to know how you did it. But here's what they don't see. They don't see the planting season. They don't see the tending season. They only show up for the harvest and think you got lucky. Every time you break focus, every time you let someone interrupt your work for something that isn't truly important, you're essentially uprooting your seeds to check if they're growing. And then you wonder why nothing ever comes to fruition. You've got to plant and then leave it alone. You've got to trust the process. You've got to give your focused effort time to compound, to build momentum, to produce results. And during that time, yes, you're going to miss things. You're going to miss parties and gatherings and social events. You're going to miss out on gossip and drama and whatever everyone else is talking about. But you know what you're not going to miss? You're not going to miss your opportunity to build something meaningful. You're not going to miss your chance to become who you're capable of becoming. Here's something else I want you to think about. Every time you break a commitment to yourself about your focus, you damage something far more important than your progress. You damage your self-respect. You damage your integrity with yourself. See, other people might not know when you said you were going to work on your business for 3 hours, but quit after 30 minutes because something more fun came up. Other people might not know when you promised yourself you'd finish that project, but got distracted by social media instead. But you know, and every time you break those promises to yourself, you're teaching yourself that your word doesn't matter, that your commitments aren't real, that you can't be trusted to follow through. And if you can't trust yourself, why should anyone else trust you? I learned to keep a private scoreboard, a place where I tracked my focused hours, my completed tasks, my progress toward my goals. Not for anyone else to see, not to post on social media or brag about to friends, but for me, so I could look myself in the mirror and know whether I was keeping my commitments. So I could see objectively whether I was really doing the work or just telling myself I was doing the work. And let me tell you, that scoreboard doesn't lie. You can fool other people. You can fool them for a long time. But you can't fool yourself when you're tracking the truth in black and white. Either you did the work or you didn't. Either you stayed focused or you didn't. Either you protected your time or you didn't. The scoreboard knows. Now let me talk to you about what actually happens during these periods of intense focus, because this is where the real magic occurs, but it's also where most people break. See, when you go into that cocoon of focused work, when you pull away from the noise and the distractions and really commit to building something, you're going to face battles that have nothing to do with the work itself. The external challenges, learning the skills, putting in the hours, doing the tasks, that's actually the easy part. The hard part is what happens in your own head during those quiet hours when it's just you and your goals and nobody's watching. There's a reason the butterfly metaphor is so powerful. When a caterpillar goes into that cocoon, if you didn't know what was happening, you'd think it was dying. It stops moving. It stops eating. It seals itself off from the world completely. And if you cut that cocoon open to help the butterfly because you're worried about it, you actually kill it. Because the struggle of breaking out of that cocoon is what makes the butterfly strong enough to fly. The transformation requires isolation. It requires struggle. It requires a period where to the outside world it looks like nothing is happening, or maybe even like something's going wrong, but inside that cocoon, everything is changing. The caterpillar is literally dissolving and reforming into something completely different. That's what real focus does to you. It dissolves the old version of you and reforms you into something capable of flight. I remember going through a period like this myself early in my career. I'd made a decision to completely rebuild my understanding of business and economics. I stopped going out. I stopped socializing. I spent every evening and weekend reading, studying, taking notes, working through ideas. And it was lonely. That's the part nobody tells you about. When you're in that cocoon, when you're in that transformation period, you feel alone. You start questioning yourself. You wonder if you're making a mistake. You wonder if what you're sacrificing is worth what you're building. Your friends are out having fun, posting pictures, living their lives, and you're sitting at your desk at 9 o'clock on a Friday night with a stack of books and a notepad, and the doubt creeps in. It whispers to you. It tells you that maybe you're taking this too seriously, that maybe you should just relax a little, that maybe one night off won't hurt. But here's what I learned during that time. The doubt is part of the process. The loneliness is part of the process. The questioning is part of the process. You're not supposed to feel comfortable during transformation. Comfort is the enemy of growth. If you're comfortable, if everything feels easy and natural and fun, that's a sign you're not pushing hard enough, you're not focusing intensely enough, you're not changing enough. Real growth happens at the edge of your comfort zone, in that space where you're not quite sure you can do what you're attempting to do, where you have to stretch and strain and push yourself beyond what feels natural. That discomfort you feel during focused work, that's not a warning sign that something's wrong. That's a confirmation that something's right. That's evidence that you're actually growing. Let me tell you about the compound effect of focused hours, because this is something most people never experience long enough to understand. When you first start working with real focus, the progress feels slow. You put in an hour and you look at what you've accomplished and it doesn't seem like much. You put in another hour the next day, and again the results seem modest. But here's what's happening beneath the surface. You're building capability. You're developing skill. You're creating understanding. And all of that compounds. It multiplies. After a month of focused daily work, you're not just 30 times better than when you started. You might be 300 times better because each hour built on the previous hour. Each day's learning enhanced the previous day's learning. Each small improvement made the next improvement easier and faster. I watched this happen with a young woman who decided to learn graphic design. She started from zero, knew nothing, but she committed to 2 focused hours every single day. No excuses, no breaks, no I'll catch up tomorrow. Just 2 hours every day for 6 months. The first month, her work was terrible. I mean really bad, the kind of stuff you'd be embarrassed to show anyone. But she kept going. Second month, still pretty rough, but you could see improvement. Third month, you could tell she was starting to understand the principles. Fourth month, her work was decent. By month 5, it was good. By month 6, it was excellent. And by the end of the year, she was getting paid for work that she couldn't have even imagined creating 12 months earlier. But here's the thing. If you looked at any single day's progress, it would have seemed insignificant. It was only when you stepped back and looked at the compounded effect of all those focused hours that you could see the transformation. That's what most people miss. They work for a week or 2 weeks or maybe even a month, and they don't see dramatic results, so they quit. They think it's not working. They think they're not talented enough or smart enough or whatever enough. But they're quitting right before the compound effect kicks in. They're quitting right before all those hours of focused work start multiplying and producing exponential results. instead of linear results. It's like climbing a mountain. The first 1,000 feet of elevation gain might take you hours of hard hiking. But that same 1,000 feet, when you're already at 10,000 feet, might only take you 30 minutes because you've built the fitness, you've learned the technique, you've developed the mental toughness. The work gets easier as you get stronger, but only if you stick with it long enough to get stronger. Here's another truth about transformation through focus. You're going to have to practice something I call profitable ignorance. That means deliberately choosing not to know things that don't serve your goals. When everyone's talking about the latest controversy or scandal or trending topic, you don't know about it because you weren't paying attention. When there's drama in your social circle, you're not involved because you weren't there. When people ask if you've seen this show or that movie or this viral video, the answer is no, because you were focused on building something that matters. And some people are going to make you feel like there's something wrong with you for not keeping up, for not being informed about everything, for not being available to discuss whatever the topic of the day is. So let me tell you about what happens when you finally emerge from that period of focused work. When you step back into the world after months of concentrated effort and deliberate isolation. There's a moment, and I've experienced this myself and watched it happen to countless others, where people look at you and something in their expression changes. It's subtle at first. They tilt their head slightly. They pause mid-sentence. They look at you like they're trying to reconcile the person standing in front of them with the person they remember. And that's when you realize they actually don't recognize you anymore. Not because your face changed, but because everything else did. The way you talk, the way you carry yourself, the confidence in your voice, the certainty in your decisions, the results you can point to. You're not the same person who went into that cocoon, and they can feel it even if they can't quite articulate it. I'll never forget watching this happen to a man I'd been mentoring. He came to me broke, confused, jumping from one failed venture to another, full of excuses about why things never worked out for him. I told him what I'm telling you now. Pick one thing, focus on it completely, and disappear until you've built something real. He took that advice seriously. For almost 2 years, I barely heard from him. No calls asking for advice every other week. No updates about his struggles. Just silence. And then one day he showed up at one of my seminars. He didn't sit in the back like he used to. He sat in the front row, and when I saw him, I almost stopped mid-sentence. This wasn't the same scattered, uncertain person I'd known. He'd built a successful consulting business, had clients in 3 countries, was making more money than he'd ever thought possible. But more than that, he'd built something inside himself, a foundation, a core of certainty that couldn't be shaken by other people's opinions or temporary setbacks. Here's what happened next, and this is the part that always fascinates me. The same people who'd questioned his absence, who'd criticized his focus, who'd maybe even mocked him for thinking he was too good for social gatherings, those same people suddenly wanted to know everything. They wanted his secrets. They wanted to know how he did it. They wanted him to teach them, to mentor them, to share his contacts and strategies and methods. And you know what the truth is? Nothing about them had changed. They were the same people with the same habits and the same scattered focus they'd always had. But he had changed. He'd transformed. And now they were looking at him completely differently. Not because he was different from who he'd always been capable of becoming, but because he'd actually done the work to become it. But here's the critical part. The lesson that separates the people who achieve one success and fade away from the people who build lasting legacies. This moment of recognition, this harvest season where everyone can see what you've built, this is not the finish line. It's just the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. Success isn't the destination where you arrive and then relax for the rest of your life. Success is a practice. It's something you do repeatedly at higher and higher levels for as long as you want to keep growing. The moment you think you've arrived, the moment you stop focusing because you've achieved something and now you can coast, that's the moment you start declining. I've seen it happen over and over again. Someone achieves success through intense focus and discipline. They build something meaningful. And then they think they've earned the right to relax, to celebrate, to enjoy the fruits of their labor indefinitely. And slowly, sometimes so slowly they don't even notice it happening, everything they built starts to erode. The skills get rusty. The habits get loose. The focus drifts. And 5 years later, 10 years later, they're wondering what happened, how they ended up back where they started. What happened is simple. They stopped doing what got them there. They stopped focusing. They stopped protecting their time. They stopped saying no to distractions.